How's it going, everyone? My name's Matt, this is Dylan, you are watching Fantasy Filmball, and today we're going to be discussing Jimmy Cameron, his new movie, Avatar, The Way of Water, the movie of the year. We've been waiting for this film for a very long time. Did you see the first film in theaters?
When it first came out, I honestly have no clue. I remember watching it once it came out on home video, but I did see it in theaters earlier this year, and it was a blast then.
I saw the first film in theaters 4 times when I was a kid. I remember I skipped school with some friends because it was one of my friends' birthdays, and I went to see the first movie in theaters in IMAX at the time. And I remember this was before I was really into movies. I had never heard of the movie beforehand, but I was absolutely blown away. There was no one else in the theater. It was just us. And it absolutely floored me. I think it's actually one of the stepping stones for me to become into movies was seeing this film. And then I went back with my family twice more, with like my brother, my parents. We all went twice. Saw it in IMAX 3D. And then I went one more time with some other friends. This film was a sensation when it came out. People now say, no cultural impact, but like everyone had to see this film at the time. I had like games on my phone that were like Avatar games and everything. This movie I was obsessed with when I was a kid, and it's here now. We've got the second one.
It's here. 13 years in the making.
Did it live up to those expectations? I know you have some very big thoughts on this film. I have some very, very big thoughts on this film. So let's just dive right in.
Yes, they did meet my expectations. They exceeded them. They broke everything that I was thinking of. I could not believe how many emotions I felt. I started off the movie on like an emotional high, feeling, oh my gosh, I'm back in Pandora. Look how great everything looks. It's so flashy, so brilliant. And then some stuff happens and you start to feel the emotional beats. And say what you want about James Cameron dialogue. Sometimes James Cameron dialogue really hits, whether it's very on the nose or not. And there's just some scenes that are burst out laugh moments. There's some scenes that are very heart moving. There's some scenes that are very just compelling. And the part I really most adored about this movie, other than the climax, which went on for about an hour and a half, which to me is so cool.
Oh my God.
You can make a normal movie's runtime just your big fight sequence. But I really enjoyed, I would say probably what Act 2 is once the Sully tribe gets to this new location. And once they're exploring how this new world works, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I am loving all the visuals I'm getting. I'm loving all the story beats. I'm loving everything that's happening through. And to me, Way of Water did everything I wanted, like I said, and more. I cannot wait to see this movie again. I normally don't see movies in IMAX 3D. I don't think I've ever seen a 3D movie before until this. And
really? Whoa.
It was a little jarring at first, but once I got used to it, I was down with it.
Did you see it in high frame rate as well?
I did.
I want to talk about that a little bit. I'll share my thoughts first, and then I want to talk about high frame rate, because for me, I have some major issues with high frame rate. Ugh. But yeah, I saw it yesterday. I'm seeing it again tomorrow in a different format, because I saw IMAX 3D high frame rate. Tomorrow I'm seeing it in ScreenX 3D, maybe 3D. Nice. I'm not sure if it's 3D. But yeah, I also loved this film. I agree with everything that you said. The thing that I was so blown away by in this movie is that it differentiates itself so much from the first one. It really utilizes very well the fact that we don't know a whole lot about these characters from the first movie. It takes what we do know, builds on it, but then presents us with these entirely different characters that we really can fall in love with. Like, personally for me, by the end of the film, I felt more connected with Spider and with... This is a bad look. I cannot remember the names of the kids other than Kiri, which was Sigourney Weaver. I connected with the kids. I want to see more of their story. I'm so excited to see more of their story, especially knowing that the titles of the next films are The Seed Bearer, The Tulkun Rider, and The Quest for Awa. I know that the Tulkun Rider has to refer to one of the kids. And the quest for Awa, I feel like, is going to revolve around Kiri's story. There's so much potential with these young characters, and grounding them within Jake Sully's story. But he's not the chosen one; they are, and that's so special to me. I had that emotional connection with these characters. I want to see where they go. Specifically, Spider. I really want to see how his character continues to develop.
I definitely feel you there. I thought this is the perfect example of what a sequel should be. I feel like you didn't need to see the first Avatar. You could just go into this one, enjoy this one completely on its own. Yes, it would help. I watched the first one the night before going to see this one, so I had like those connecting tissues. Like there's some like shot for shot recreations from the first one. Like, oh my gosh, that's the same shot.
Beat for beat too, because there were times when I was like, oh, this is the point where this happened in the first film, where now they're learning a new community and they have to enter into, like, you know, the whole sequence in the first film where Neytiri teaches Jake how to ride the horses, how to ride the banshees, all of that. The same goddamn thing happens in this one at the same point in the film. There's so many parallels that just show, like, Jimmy Cameron, he knows the formula. He's using the formula. He's saying, yeah, I know you know I'm using the formula, but fuck you, I don't care. I'm doing it anyways.
Yes. I also want to echo what you said earlier about the kids. You got, I'm going to butcher the pronunciations of these names, but you got Neytarim as the older brother. You have Loak as the younger brother, and then you have Tuk as the youngest daughter, in addition to the one Sigourney Weaver plays that you had mentioned before, Kiri. And they all were so amazing. The one negative I do have for this movie is I wish there was more Neytiri with Zoe Saldana.
Yeah, she's missing from the film.
Yeah, I really missed her presence because in the first movie, yes, the movie is Jake Sully's, but Neytiri is the heart and soul of the first Avatar. And I know a motion capture performance would never be nominated, but in a perfect world, she's nominated for Best Actress in 2009. Yeah. But for this one, there is a good portion of this 3-hour movie where she's not in, but when she is on screen, she is so captivating. She steals her moments, and she just shows how James Cameron is able to craft an amazing action hero regardless of gender and can do it in such a big and inventive fashion. And I just really love this ensemble here. In my personal awards, this may be a Best Ensemble nomination when we do those Year of N ones, but obviously I know that's not a case for any real awards bodies. But I mean, if Jackass Forever can get one, why can't Way of Water?
I don't know if I'd go that far with the ensemble, but they're all giving their all. They're all doing very well. The characters, I think, work because of the performances. Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to that. It wouldn't be in my top 5, but I wouldn't be opposed at all. But, you know, there's just so much heart in this film, and I think everyone involved clearly knows how special it is. But what I really want to focus on just a little bit is the action sequences. Because I think this is where the film really shines. It's not in the story. It's not even in the world building, because I think the first film shines much more in the world building than it does in the action. This film is an action goddamn masterpiece. Like you said, the climax of this film is like 90 minutes long, and it's just nonstop. But aside from that, it has some of the most thrilling sequences in ages. Like some of the scenes at the very beginning, particularly some of the scenes between the enemy Avatar and the kids. That was such a tense sequence. The sequence with the shark had my heart pounding, like, out of my chest. And the entire climax of the film is like if James Cameron smushed together his work on Aliens and his work on Titanic into one beast of an action sequence. I get the way that I feel about this whole film is that outside of SS Rajamouli, James Cameron and SS Rajamouli are the only two directors making action at this level in the world right now. So creative, so like endlessly creative. What I've said about RRR in the past is that like every sequence, it just steps up the craziness, the insanity, the level of what the fuck, I didn't expect that to happen. I could have never even imagined that level of action. That's the same thing happening here. Like, there were some moments that literally had my jaw on the goddamn floor. I was sitting there in the theater looking like a fucking idiot with my mouth open, just like in awe of these action scenes.
Yeah. I adore the climax of this movie, which we can get into in a little bit, but I think my favorite part of this movie, I had to pick like one scene, is when Loak, the youngest son of Jake and Neytiri, goes out. He has to make friends with a certain group of people. He makes friends and they go out, and something happens with him, and he has about, I would say, 10 or so minutes of straight screen time where it's just him with various water creatures. And those scenes, just the way they were shot, because it was almost exclusively underwater, the way they were going back and forth between color grading and the action, the sentimentalness there, just all really hit. One of the scenes is, if you did see the re-release, part of what you saw beforehand, and just seeing it in context of the film adds so much extra weight. I just really, as you mentioned before, I really connected with all of the new characters very easily. Maybe that was just me wanting to, but also I feel like the movie makes it pretty easy for you to feel engaged and get connected with this group of Avatar, the Sully tribe, very quickly. And once you connect, you get a good 3 hours with them, and you can keep bonding with them throughout the story. And once you hit the end of the movie, you feel every gut punch, you feel every moment, every beat, and it ends. You're like, wait, 3 hours is over? This felt so quick. I want more.
It breezes by.
Give me that 9-hour cut of Avatar 3 that James Cameron submitted. I don't care. Just give it, and I will take my little intermissions in the theater or something. I'll pay a full 30, 60, whatever it is for a 9-hour cut.
The level of detail in this story, the thematic parallels to colonialism. I've said it before, but I think by the end of the Avatar saga, when we get to the 5th film, when we finish the quest for Awa, I think that it's going to be pretty undeniable that the Avatar series will sit beside Dune and The Lord of the Rings as the most detailed works of science fiction out there. The depth in this world, the amount of thought that has clearly been put into every single aspect of Pandora is so evident. This world feels lived in. It feels massive. There's so much that is left to explore. I gotta say, I really hope that James Cameron doesn't get stuck with us being in the water, because the end of the film where Jake Sully says, like, oh, you know, this is it, we're home, it kind of makes me worried that the rest of the films are kind of redo a little bit of what we saw here that was so special, which is the water. I mean, we know that the 4th film is called The Tulkun Rider, and that makes it sound like another water movie, because the Tulkun is obviously the whales in this. So I hope he doesn't get stuck making 3 more water movies, because part of the spectacularness of Pandora is that there's so much to see. There's the forests. Yeah. There's, like, I want to see more mountains. I want to see all the different ecosystems that this world has to offer. I want to see deserts. I want to see how these different tribes of Na'vi exist across the world and how colonialism impacts them in different ways. I really hope that the next 3 movies are not just like whaling and oil drilling is bad times infinity.
Stephen Lang, he's back. As the Colonel. Colonel Miles, he is not dead. He's alive. I think the way they kept him alive is very cool. Because in the trailers you do see, like, oh, is that Colonel? Yeah, it is. You're like, how? He died. But I think the way they kept him alive is very interesting. I think it adds a lot to what they can do in maybe future installments for various other characters. And I felt like yes, you can say he's a generic 90s villain, but this movie really levels up his character, kind of like, as you mentioned a little bit before about just science fiction, hopping over to another billion-dollar franchise, MCU. Thanos is kind of just a generic villain for a few movies, and then when you hit Infinity War, he has so many layers and so many dimensions. And in this movie, Lang becomes more than just the big bad. He has a heart. He's trying to connect with Spider. He's trying to avenge his former self, and you can see throughout the movie he's weighing those. While he's leaning more towards one way, he's trying to do both at the same time. And at the end of the movie, that final scene between the Sully tribe and the Colonel, where Neytiri and the Colonel each have an opposing child at knife throat, you see the humanity in this character come through, and that's something I really hope they do dive into in a future movie. Like you're talking about Spider, will they reconnect, or will Spider be someone who's always has the daddy issues, for a lack of words, and they're gonna butt heads, or will eventually they come together and the Colonel becomes a good guy in a sense?
I've always thought he's been a great villain. He's incredibly intimidating, the first Avatar, but what I liked here, yes, they gave him humanity, but I also see in him more of his motivation. Because this is not someone who's hell-bent on, pillaging this world for resources. He's not the business guy. He's just a military man with principles. He's not so different from Jake Sully. Jake Sully also has principles. He's also a military guy. But with Quaritch, what's so interesting about his principles is that he is mostly determined to not be weak. Weakness is his enemy. And so he's not someone who he doesn't feel the need to destroy Pandora. He's not ideologically involved. He just needs to win. That's it. That's all he cares about. When he crushes his own puny skull of his human self, that's him saying, well, this version of me was weak. This version of me didn't have the guts to do what he needed to do.
Yeah.
I do. And I think that makes a fantastic villain, because it's someone with the drive and the principles. It's fascinating. I think he's a great villain. I cannot wait to see where his story continues. I like the fact that he made it through the movie.
I do too.
I do.
And I like the way he was saved too, with Spider being the one to save him, to help maybe set up a future installment where they do reconvene, because they do part paths here at the end, but you can tell they still do both care about each other, even though it is very estranged and a very difficult type relationship. But we've talked about the spectacle, we've talked about the plot, the movie itself. Now let's get into some of these technicals, because I think that comes with years, that comes with a higher budget, but I think everything was leveled up. The VFX, the editing, the sound, all of it comes together to just promote this beautiful looking project. I know you have a few issues with the frame rate. Gemini Man here. But I don't know. This movie just looks so beautiful to me, and I'm really excited to see it in not 3D, just to see how do some scenes look, because obviously 3D kind of skews, especially like the corners of a frame sort of thing.
And 3D also dulls the colors a little bit.
I just, there were some scenes I was like, this is like a painting. This is not an actual, camera. I know it's VFX, but, this just looks like you could frame, any, there's always those movies where people are like, oh, you could frame any scene of this. And to me, Way of Water feels like that.
Yeah, I wish I'm seeing it again tomorrow. I hope that seeing it without the high frame rate will make me feel much more kind on the visuals of the film. But actually, I think that, to me, the visuals in my first watch were the big negative. Gemini Man, I also saw that in high frame rate. Mm-hmm. That film looks like a fucking soap opera. It doesn't look like a professional movie. It looks like something I could have shot on my fucking camcorder. Avatar has the same feel to me. And despite the fact that it's got all of these brilliant visuals, these crazy visual effects that clearly cost a lot of money, the lack of motion blur, the smoothness of every image, the fact that sometimes, I'm gonna say I didn't notice the high frame rate on very slower shots. When there was a lot of action, I really noticed it. It makes it look like a documentary, not in a great way. When some people say, oh, it looks like a documentary, what they're saying is, oh, it looks so real and it immerses you. When I say it looked like a documentary, I mean it looked cheap and fast.
Okay.
And that's not a knock on the lighting or the visual effects. It's just that the technology makes it look like a soap opera or a sports cast or a video game.
I can see that. The video game thing, I definitely got a feel of throughout. This is like a cutscene of the game I'm playing on my PS5 or something like that.
I get why directors like Ang Lee or James Cameron are wanting to push frame rate. But the fact of the matter is it's not an experiment worth it, it's something that looks unnatural, it looks uncinematic, because the fact of the matter is, wave your hand in front of your face. You see motion blur, right? You're seeing blur in that image. In high frame rate, there is no motion blur, which means that inherently there's something that it's an uncanny valley effect. Because we're not seeing any motion blur, it feels like the motion is too clean and it doesn't feel real anymore. So although it looks incredibly real, it also looks like a Best Buy TV tech demo, where it's just like showing you what can be done without thinking whether it should be done.
I feel like we could talk about this movie forever.
We could.
We're both going to see it again, so I feel like we should return to this discussion after we both see it again in the coming weeks, because there will be a little bit of dead time where there won't be as many movies coming out. But I do want to talk about this film's Oscar chances.
That's true. I was going to say we're not ending this without talking Oscar chances, because Dylan, all year long, we've done like 30 weeks of this discussion back and forth every week talking about it. And since when did we start? We started like May, June?
Let's look.
Since
our first,
let's say June.
Yeah, my first predictions was on June 1st.
June 1st. Ever since then, you've been saying that you think Avatar: The Way of Water is winning Best Picture. I want to hear from you. Do you think it will? Do you still think it should? What's your predictions?
I think those are two different answers at the moment. Should?
They are, yes.
Yes. Very much so, yes. Will? I think there is still a chance for it to win. The biggest case it needs is it needs Everything Everywhere to become the front runner. And then Everything Everywhere hits that front runner fatigue, and then Way of Water wins the Globe, which I think right now, looking at just the Globes on paper, Avatar seems like the best case for the Globes, because Fableman's, that's such a lame pick, especially for them. Elvis, you can make the case, the Bohemian Rhapsody Part 2. Tar doesn't seem like it's going to win.
No, Tar's
Maverick, if it was going to win, Cruz would be there, Kaczynski would be there. They could still pick it without them two, but it still feels weird to pick it without them two. And then at least Fableman's versus Avatar, and Avatar hit everything it needed to at the Globes. And the Globes want to make a big, like, hey, we're back. People are here. Cameron, I know people don't vote like that, but that's just a little thing in my head. But looking at the slate of nominations that this movie could get, I could see getting up to 9, with the floor being 6. 9 would include song and score, which are things that I'm not predicting at the moment, but they're things that I think if this movie overperforms, it could be the 5 slot. Song, if they just ignore RRR, which I don't think they will, but if they do, that opens up another spot with the already Diane Warren, and they're going to still nominate her even after giving her an honorary one. So there could be 2 spots there. And then score, if, like, I don't know, Pinocchio or Women Talking keeps falling. I don't think this will happen, but there's a chance for something spot up there. That's why I say it's best day. I think it's at 9. It's worst. I think it's hitting that 5-6 mark. And that would include visual effects, editing, cinematography, production design, sound, picture, director. So I have it for 7 at the moment.
Yeah, I see it getting all of those. All of those that you said.
So 7's the floor, 9's the max when you add in song and score. Do I think it's getting that? No, I thought the score was great, but I understand why people aren't predicting it. It's not head and shoulders above the first, but I think it's very good. And then the songs, I would very much encourage people to vote for song chord. I feel like that's the definition of the type of song that should be nominated in an original song. Songs that are actually in the movie and that play a part to the story. Like Natsu Natsu does that. Ciao Papa does that. Hold My Hand, Lift Me Up don't really do that. Applause, I'm not going to see Tell Like a Woman, so I don't know. Carolina doesn't do that. Stand Up doesn't do that. New Body Roomba doesn't do that from what I understand. I haven't seen White Noise
it's
as well.
A credit
from
song,
what I know.
But
yeah, it's a credit song.
Yeah.
So song chord plays an integral part to the story. It opens and closes the movie. To me, that seems like, oh, we should put this in, but it's missing at places. I don't know if it's missing because there's 2 songs now, and people who want to nominate a song are splitting between this and the Weeknd song. As a huge Weeknd fan, this song's fine. In the IMAX, I loved it. Outside, I'm like, it's whatever. It plays really well with the movie's themes after seeing that closing scene, but when you listen to it on your own, it's not really one you're going to want to re-listen to. But yes, to your original question to end this ramble, Best Picture, Best Director, I think they're a package deal. And at the moment, I still feel good with that. But if it loses Globe, that's when it moves out. Because this film did exactly what I needed it to do. It is a spectacle. It's innovating. You can make the case for Villeneuve missing last year. Cameron's not Villeneuve. Cameron's hitting everything so far. Way of Water got in AFI. It got in NBR. It got in Critics' Choice. All these places like, oh, was there a screener issue or did they see it? Maybe there was, but the people who did see it were passionate enough to get it in. And Spielberg, to me, has never felt like a director winner. I understand the case people make for him, but he just doesn't feel like it. And I know people would be like, well, Daniels or McDonough or Rajamouli or something. But to me, Cameron's sitting right there. And I understand, wait for 3, wait for 5. But the case that is for 3 or 5, the technical like level up from 1 to 2 isn't going to be the case for 2 to 3 or 2 to 5. The only case there is give it to him for the last one. But as we've seen the news, we don't really know what the last one's going to be. He said, oh, I may finish 1 3, not direct 4 or 5.
Oh, no, he's going to do 4 and 5. He's going to do 4 and 5.
And then he just said, maybe we just ended at 3 and we don't even go to 5. We don't really know how this is going to wrap up. So I feel like instead of playing the wait game, you just do it now. But like I said, I'm not an Oscar voter, so I don't have the same mindset as them. Just to me, my gut's telling me that, and that's the same gut that was telling me Avatar in June, Elvis in June. These are players.
I read a really great article today, which was talking about the 2009 Oscar race from the perspective of the people that ran the campaign for Avatar. Because Avatar and The Hurt Locker were the 2 front runners that year. Obviously, every year usually devolves down to it's this film versus this film. It's The Power of the Dog versus Coda. It is Nomadland versus... it's Parasite
Trial?
versus 1917. It's Roma versus Green Book. Shape of Water, 3 Billboards. La La Land, Moonlight. Like, it goes on and on. Hurt Locker, Avatar. You had Hurt Locker, the smallest of the Best Picture nominees, the smallest film to ever win Best Picture. This is a very realistic war film. It's an independent project directed by Catherine Bigelow, who used to be married to James Cameron. Then you have James Cameron's biggest movie of all time, Avatar, the studio spectacle. And the interesting thing that they were saying is that they didn't feel like voters at the time were ready for Avatar. Because this film typically, like the only sci-fi or fantasy movie to ever win an Academy Award for Best Picture was Lord of the Rings. And that took 3 whole years for them to get there. But with Avatar, they were fighting an uphill battle the entire time, they said. And what they were saying is, originally they weren't even planning a Best Picture push for it. They weren't even planning to get it nominated because it just seemed so unlike the type of stuff that normally got nominated. But it was the first year of 10 nominations, so they were like, fuck it, let's just go for it. Let's try and go all in, get a Best Picture nomination. But the issue that they had at the time was that they knew that the film would flop at the Oscars if they sent out screeners. Because obviously the Academy's kind of moved off this, but just picture 2009, home video technology, you're sending out DVDs in like 480p quality of Avatar to be watched on people's like big tube TVs, like flat screen TVs, plasma TVs. That's like a luxury in 2009 at that point. So their entire like system and how they kind of pushed for the award was that they hosted like hundreds of screenings exclusively for voters to be like, you need to see this in theaters, you need to see it in theaters, you need to see it in theaters. And ultimately they lost because a lot of people didn't see it in theaters. A lot of people were lazy and watched it at home and went, oh well, I don't get the hype of Avatar, when like you had to see it in the theater because that's how it's meant to be seen. I think that things are different now. And I think that the lack of DVD screeners, the high definition Academy screening room, is going to give people enough of the experience that they will possibly like it more. I think the Academy's more ready for a blockbuster like this in 2022 than they were in 2009. Do I think it's going to win Best Picture? Absolutely not. I don't. I'm not with you still, especially after seeing the critic reviews. I don't think it has a stronger case than the first one did, because the first one was the first of its kind. However, a lot of the barriers that the first film faced do not exist anymore.
But for everyone out there, let us know what you thought about The Way of Water. I loved it. Matt loved it.
I love it.
I want to see it do big things. And I am really excited to see it again. Let us know, did you see it in the high frame rate? Did the high frame rate mess with you like it did with Matt, or was it not really something you noticed?
You know that scene where Spider's in the machine and his nose starts bleeding because it's like so sensory? That's how I felt with the goddamn high frame rate. I was like, my nose is about to just start fucking going off right now.
Well, hopefully everyone out there, their nose didn't bleed.
Yeah, hopefully not. Let us know what you think.
Until next time, my name is Dyl.
And my name is Matt, and we are James Cameron's strongest soldiers at Fantasy Filmball.